Hey there, welcome to the next episode. Today, I figured I would walk through some basic AI literacy and just give you some foundational knowledge to get up and running with these tools. Remember, I'm not going to be repeating this forever, but my whole goal with this is to basically teach the fundamentals of using AI from the point of view of just your standard everyday end user, right? You don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be a computer science engineer to get a lot out of these tools. They're so powerful in helping you get real work done. They're also incredibly powerful at just having fun with it, which if you stick around to the end, I've got kind of a fun thing to share with you. This video is going to be part of an AI literacy series that talks about a couple core things that I think are really important to be the most efficient and effective with these tools. One of which is just basic understanding of what these things are and how they work. The second thing is something that I call how to speak AI, right? Like how do you talk to these tools and get the most out of them? This is basically prompt engineering, if you will. I don't really like the term prompt engineering myself, but there are some particular ways to talk to these tools to get more out of them. So I'll share a few tips there. The next thing is going to be building a little bit of intuition with when to reach for these tools, what they're good at, what they're not so good at. And hopefully I'll help you get there a little bit faster by providing some tips and tricks and sort of special ways to prompt them, special words to use in your prompt. That will help you just level up your skills with using these tools. And I'm going to be giving concrete examples along the way. So to sort of kick this series off, what I'd like to do is talk with a couple of my favorite chat assistants here to illustrate the point that I want to make of what these tools are, how they work, and why that's important for you to know that. All right, so the first thing I like to do when I'm teaching people about AI tools is say this sentence, and don't worry, it's gonna sound really intense, really technical, but I'm gonna immediately break it down for you. 10,000 foot view, what these tools are, and I'm talking large language models, chat assistants. They are what's known as autoregressive next token predictors. While that sounds super technical, and it is, all you need to get out of that is that these tools are predicting the next word in a sequence based on all the preceding words that came before it. And the way they're able to predict these words in a way that makes sense and is coherent and sounds like human language is through their training. And the training piece of it comes in a couple different phases, but the big component of that is the training data that's given to them. And this is basically, as far as we're concerned, all the written language on the internet. And this ends up being on the order of tens of trillions of words. There's also proprietary data, training sets, and things like that, but we don't have to worry about that too much as the end user necessarily. And there's also the training phase that comes in where the engineers that create them, they give them basically instructions to go off and teach themselves the relationships between words. This allows them to do things like they start to understand the context between words. So like where certain words appear in relation across vast amounts of text. Things like grammar, relationships, the basic building blocks of language. They learn all of this and sort of encode it inside of their knowledge. And then when we talk to them, they're sort of like retrieving this information. They're kind of like recalling it and bringing it back up in the best way that they know how. And it's kind of miraculous that they're able to have such an intelligent conversation back and forth with us because of this technology. And as a little bonus tip, one thing to know if you want to impress your friends at a party, this particular architecture that enables this is something called the transformer. And really the biggest thing you need to know, sort of like the high level stuff here, is the transformer is what allows it to realize these relationships between words during the training phase. And then during the processing phase, when we're prompting and having a back and forth conversation, the transformer architecture is what allows these conversations to remain coherent and make sense over long periods of time. Okay, so why is all of this stuff important to know about? Real quick, let's break it down in a more simple way, right? Everything I just said on the technical level, let's bring it down to earth a little bit. So these tools, what they're doing is because of all of the information that they've seen in their training and the way that they've taught themselves these relationships between words, when you go to have a conversation with it, it is able to have a much more coherent conversation. It's able to understand relationships between the kinds of things that you're asking about. And because of the information that's loaded into the prompt, as it's doing that next word prediction based off of everything it's seen before, it's taking all of that previous information into account as it's moving forward predicting the next word. And every time it predicts another word, it updates all of its information and probabilistic sort of mathematics that are going on in order to predict the next word. And it tweaks the little sort of like knobs and levers behind the scenes and says, okay, because of all this information loaded up in this conversation now, the next most likely word in the sequence is this. So let's look at this by way of example, right? We'll take a look at a couple different ways that this plays out in reality. And again, this is going to help inform you when you go out to do real meaningful stuff with these tools, as well as when you're just going to have some fun with it. You can better inform the model up front in your initial prompt or maybe in your first couple parts of the conversation. So that way, when you're ready to get down to work, it has everything it needs sort of loaded up, ready to go, and you're going to get much better results because of that. Okay, so let's just say you were a teacher and you're teaching a course on artificial intelligence. I'm just going to use some low-hanging fruit here so I can give some concrete examples. And just know, whatever I'm putting in here, you could tweak this and turn it into whatever you want. So let's take a look at this teacher example. So one thing I like to do when I'm working with these tools, especially when you're starting to work on anything from like the pedagogical side of things, is to give it an expert role in as something like an instructional designer. You can also just say, hey, you're an expert teacher in X field, or you're an engaging teacher in higher education or at a middle school level. You want to give it very specific information. So let me just throw in a prompt here and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're in Claude, and in case you don't know, Claude is a chat assistant provided by a company called Anthropic. It happens to be one of my favorite chat assistants, one of my go-tos. It's especially good at, I would say, giving relatable text back. So if you're looking for help with work like writing and things along those lines, I just like the tone and yeah, just I guess the vibe is the best way to put it, the vibe of Claude. I really appreciate that. So I'm gonna give two examples. One, I've loaded up this prompt here. It's quite a doozy. Don't worry, I'll share it in the description below. We'll give some resources down there. But basically, you're queuing up this chat assistant to give you the best response possible back. So this would be something I describe as prompt engineering. And don't worry if this looks kind of overwhelming to you. The key takeaways here are just take a look at how specific I am, the instructions I'm giving it, and even giving it some guidelines for things like what kind of tone to use and things along those lines. So basically, I'm giving it an expert role first. You have domain area expertise in artificial intelligence. So again, we're loading up the context of the conversation. We're loading up the information in this prompt. So when it goes to talk, when it goes to give me the answer, what it's going to do is it takes my prompt in consideration first, and it has all of this language loaded up, an expert role, the topics, all of these things. And then because of all that that's inside of its sort of like working memory, called the context window, it will better predict the next word in the sequence moving forward. And typically it gives you a much better result on your first try, or at least it gives you a better starting point, and then you can work with the output in a more meaningful way, in my opinion. One last thing I did, which you don't have to do this necessarily, but I'm just saying, hey, you're being connected with a colleague who needs some help. You could also say things like, are you ready to help? Or you can just leave that bit off on the end altogether. So Claude, happy to help, goes off and is ready to start working. So let's just say I wanted an outline for a basic overview of AI literacy, right? Like let's say I'm creating a curriculum or I'm creating a new course, and I want some curriculum design help, something like that. Well, I can just now go in here with this context loaded up, and I'll get a much more detailed and specific kind of response. Now, why don't I ask for some help creating a one-course lesson plan on the basics of large language models. Let's see what Claude suggests I should be talking about. Now, again, you're probably going to notice how specific I'm being. And remember, talking with these tools, you want to be as specific and detailed as possible. When you're sitting down to do work with them, you wouldn't want to just say, hey, create a lesson plan for teaching about autoregressive next token prediction, because you're probably going to get a more technical based description, a more technical focused, maybe even programming, computer engineering type of lesson plan. But what you get when you start to give it more information, such as, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I want like a 20 to 30 minute lesson on this topic. You fill in the topic. Here's my target audience who should be receiving this information. And here's actually what I want to talk about, right? This is me guiding the tool to get better results or to get some ideas for concepts and ideas that I kind of already have cooking. And I just want to get a leg up or speed up my process of actually generating the material for this. So don't leave it up to chance. If you know what you want or you know sort of the direction, feed that into the tool. There's nothing saying you can't do that. So great, it's going to help me develop this lesson. And now it's even asking some follow-up questions, because I did ask it in my sort of like system prompt up here, right, to have it perform in an iterative and conversational way. Or it seems to have a few gaps in helping me get to my desired outcome here. So let's see what it has to say. What kind of setting? Great question. Will participants have access to an LLM? Actually, yeah, I hope you have a LLM, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Google's Gemini, Meta, whatever tool of choice you like to use. Yeah, have it fired up. You can actually start working on your own ideas alongside of me. Great way to use these tools. All right, real quick, I'm going to answer the questions, then we'll just look at what it gives me. All right, and one of the powerful things about these tools, again, is that they're able to understand the context of the conversation pretty well. So you might notice, I'm not giving it a bunch of extra information at this point. I'm just sort of following up with the questions it asks. So, I'm just like, yep, one. And it knows that I'm talking about one in the follow-up questions that it has. So I'm just answering them kind of point blank, really short, just to get the actual answer going for us. So it gives us a duration, right? We've got some learning objectives even, because I gave it that idea of an instructional designer. And in case you're not aware, that's basically someone that helps faculty or gets together with educators and helps them think through how to best deliver their course material to their students using pedagogical best practices and things like that. All of that sort of wrapped into how they inform educators on how to deliver their content. So here we go. I'm just going to scan through this. It gives us learning objectives. We get a detailed lesson plan. We've got some real-world applications, closing, and some practice for my participants. We even get a teaching notes section. Like, I didn't ask for a lot of this stuff, but because I gave it all of this context up front, instructional designer, you help people craft detailed lesson plans, all of this information that's helpful to give me a better result, such as this, it's going to give me so much more than if I had just asked, hey, help me come up with a lesson plan on this topic. So let's take a look at how different the response is now. I'm still going to use Claude. We're going to compare apples to apples. And then in my next example, I'm going to hop over to ChatGPT just to spice things up and show you how these tools all kind of work in a similar fashion. All right, so we're about to start a fresh conversation. I'm going to paste in the same thing that I asked it. You'll notice that it changed my bullet points to asterisk. Put a pin in that. I'll come back to sort of how to talk to these tools in a better, more efficient way later on, but just, for future reference, if you want to look it up before I do a whole video on that, it's called Markdown. If you're not a developer or a coder, you've probably never heard of that, but it's just a way to write in plain text some formatting without actually seeing the formatting like you normally would in Word or Google Docs or your email or something like that. So remember how detailed that last one was. I have a feeling, Claude, because these models are pretty good, I have a feeling this is still going to be helpful, but you'll notice a large difference, hopefully. All right, so there you go. It just sort of like answers, right? Like these tools have also been trained post-development to be as helpful as possible and to answer you the best they can. So when you're not giving it more context or more instructions to give an iterative back and forth type conversation, it's just going to start answering you. And sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes you want a quick answer. Sometimes you want it to be more thorough and detailed. Sometimes you want it to follow your industry best practices or provide it some extra information. But this was just to kind of showcase that the types of word choices you use, the types of instructions, the different kinds of content that you provide it in that first or second part of the conversation really changes the output of these tools. So this is just more general, right? Like you get an intro, you get a little core concept, but it's not super targeted necessarily. It's just sort of theoretical and high level. The practical application side of things, we've got business writing, technical work, creative fields. It's sort of just saying, hey, these are the things that LLMs are really good at. And then let's see what we got next. Best practices and tips. So yes, they're sort of just general key takeaways, high level, not super specific. If we go back to that other chat, the examples are much more detailed. They're kind of focused on the things that it asked me follow-up questions on, right? Like I said, education, legal work, the fitness industry. So it's going to give more examples along those lines. I think that the practical demonstration is pretty funny. It's like using emojis and stuff. There you have it. It kind of sticks to the examples that I requested, and it's going to help me realize my vision a little bit better than if I'm having to then take its sort of generalized examples and apply them to what I actually had in my head. Because if you have it in your head, you should probably put it in your prompt. That's sort of one of my biggest tips, or at least techniques that I use. I'm not withholding information from these tools if I know that it's going to help me, or if I know that I want to see sort of how they interpret or come up with relationships or come up with examples that might be helpful for me to use when I'm sitting down teaching people about these different technologies. Real quick, what I want to do is just break down the whole concept of tokens and the context window, because when you're learning about these tools, I promise these concepts are going to keep coming back over and over again. And as long as these AI firms, these research firms developing these technologies are still using large language models and the transformer architecture when they're building these tools, like all the most popular ones are, then this is going to stay true for the life of that technology. So this isn't some flashy thing. You know, I know it sounds technical, but it is really important to understand at a high level, so that way you're able to interact with them more effectively. So tokens and context windows. LLMs don't think really in words. They think in what's called a token. And really all you need to know about tokens is it's just a representation of a word. It can be a portion of a word. It could be the full word. And really the way that these are broken down, the way it plays out, on average, about 3/4 of a word is one token. Why do I keep saying tokens? Why do I keep talking about this? Well, because there's something called the context window, which is effectively the large language model's short-term memory, and this is measured in tokens. So we're kind of at a point where the context window has gotten large enough where we don't normally have to worry about it on a day-to-day basis. If you're just having a back and forth conversation like I was showing here, then you're probably not going to have to worry about it. If you're in an industry that deals with a lot of data processing or super large documents, or you have a huge knowledge base that you're trying to access and talk to, then the token limits might come into more of a factor. And basically, you'll see this touted as like, you know, X model has a 200,000 token context window limit. Or, you know, in the case of Gemini, which is Google's offering, it has up to 2 million tokens. So let's look at Google, because they actually have a tool for their token count here. And when I say model, these are just the different chat assistants that you actually have access to talk to. So in the case of Google, they have several here. When you're just working with their kind of like public facing interface, if you're just at Google Gemini, let me pull that up so you can see it, right? If you're just at gemini.google.com, you have access to Gemini Pro if you pay for it. I don't happen to pay for Gemini at the moment. Or you have access to 1.5 Flash, which is their free model to use. And Google is one of the few that, using their chat interface, don't give you access to their most intelligent model for free. They don't give you any kind of access to that. But pro tip, you can go to aistudio.google.com and use their latest and greatest models all for free. It's kind of amazing. You don't have to put in a credit card. You don't have to do anything. It looks like a more intense interface because it's geared towards developers, but I'm going to walk you through the basics right now so you don't have to worry about it. Let's look at Gemini 1.5 Pro, and you'll see the token count here has gone up to 2 million tokens. So again, tokens. Humans don't think in tokens, right? We think in words. So kind of an arbitrary example, but let's see if Google Gemini can give me a quick token to word calculator. Okay, so here we go. This was really just to illustrate the point of counting the tokens and the fact that these models, even though counting or math isn't really something that they do natively, they're able to write programs for you that can do this. You don't have to code. I don't know how to code Python. I mean, I understand a little bit of it, but I wouldn't be able to write this myself. I do some coding, but it's in JavaScript. And while they're relatable, it would take me a while to get up and running with Python. So, you know, this gave it to me in Python. I didn't specify a coding language, but you can see here, this is what I wanted to show. So all of this output here, my prompt plus what the model provided, this ended up being about 676 tokens. So we're not even scratching the surface of the 2 million token context window that Gemini has. The main thing that happens, you might be wondering, okay, why do I care? What does it mean to me? What does it matter to me that these tools have certain context window limits? Well, if you're working on these through like these kinds of interfaces, which most of you will, right? Like you're going to be using ChatGPT, you're going to be using Claude, and what you're typing in this window here or uploading as a document, what happens if you're having a super long conversation and there's a lot of turns in the conversation, a lot of back and forth, and you go outside of that token window limit, what ends up happening is eventually, because it's kind of seen as that short-term memory, it's like a sliding scale. I think one of the examples that Claude gave was like, you can imagine it like a sliding door, like wherever the door is, like if you're kind of staying with the door as it slid along, then whatever you can see through that window, that's what's available to you. So as the door is sliding along, like whatever's on this side here, that's gone. It's out of the conversation. Some of these companies, they do some kind of helpful summarizations and things like that and put that back into the conversation behind the scenes. These are things that like you don't necessarily see as the end user, but the effect is it's sort of able to remember certain things earlier on, but it's not going to remember specific details if you go outside of that context window limit. Just really quickly, I said the word model a couple times, and I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page as to what that means as well. I showed this off a little bit inside of Gemini, but they have this model dropdown, and these are the actual chat assistants that you're engaging with. And they have different names. And this is one of those things when you start talking about artificial intelligence, you quickly devolve into just this jargony, for whatever reason, the way that they picked names for these, it makes it so difficult to talk about, but that's just the way it is. So Google has a whole host of models under Gemini. This is sort of like their front-facing AI chat assistant, and it goes by one of two names, Gemini 1.5 Pro or Gemini 1.5 Flash. And typically what'll happen with all of these companies, whether it's Google or OpenAI or Anthropic or Meta or what have you, whatever other companies crop up, they usually give you limited access to their free model, they give you limited access to their professional model first, their most intelligent, the one that typically you have to pay a subscription for in order to interact with on a daily basis. So you might get like 5 to 10 conversations back and forth with their best models, and then they'll kick you down to the free tier. It's not to say that their free tier models, the sort of less intelligent, typically they're a little bit faster, they're a little bit lower in something known as their parameter count, which roughly equates to the level of intelligence of the models. But there's a lot of other details and nuance that I'm completely skipping over when talking about this. So just know that 1.5 Pro is the most intelligent, and then it goes down to 1.5 Flash. So for ChatGPT, you have a bunch of models now that you can use actually. There's something called 4O, which the O stands for Omni, because it's multimodal. You can put in images and text and documents and eventually audio, video, all of that sort of thing. And it knows how to interpret that and output all of those things as well. All of those different types of media and input types. You also have something, they've especially trained a version of their model to work with something called Canvas. Kick that one down the road. We're going to talk about Canvas in a later video. But it helps you like organize and work on specialized projects together with ChatGPT. It actually opens up like a separate interface that you can edit and iterate on projects. It's actually pretty sweet, if I could say so myself. Then you have their two reasoning models that they're calling. They're calling it O1, and this is their most advanced for any kind of reasoning tasks because it goes through a couple extra reasoning steps during processing, and it allows it to more thoroughly think through problems and give more nuanced responses. Just as an example, it's been able to do things like finish, graduate and PhD level mathematics and science problems.
No chance. No chance. No chance. No chance. Come on. There's no way. There's no way. What line are you in? 208. Oh my God, it ran!
It's pretty amazing the kinds of things that it's capable at. And it's definitely different than working with GPT-4o or their standard chat assistant. So we'll look at some of those use cases later on, but there's tons of information out there if you wanted to get started with one of those today. And then their sort of everyday model that the free tier users get access to is GPT-4o Mini, similar to Gemini's 1.5 Flash. This is just sort of their smaller, slightly less intelligent model, but still plenty capable, still able to do all the normal stuff that you'd expect from these chat tools if you've been using them for a little while. And finally, inside Claude, we have 3 models here. They've got 3.5 Sonnet, and they're all named after literary terms. Claude 3 Opus and Claude 3 Haiku, which they just announced 3.5 Haiku, so sort of like that other iteration. And they're expected to release sort of all of their models up to that 3.5 level at some point this fall for us as like the end users to use. Like I said, Claude is one of my favorites to use, especially for writing tasks or coming up with ideas. ChatGPT is sort of my Swiss Army knife, my go-to for all kinds of things. And often I'm actually putting and pitting multiple chat assistants against each other or working on the same concept or idea and just copy and pasting back and forth, because sometimes I like the response a little bit better from one over the other. And why limit myself? I'm perfectly happy and not bothered by just copying and pasting back and forth between multiple windows to get the desired results that I'm looking for. Okay, so we've talked about how these things work kind of at a high level. Let's do a quick recap, and then we're gonna hit it all home with one final example. So, large language models, these chat assistants that everybody's sort of been talking about, it's all the buzz recently. Things like Anthropic's Claude, OpenAI ChatGPT, Google Gemini. The basic principle, the foundation of how they work, is that they are predicting the next word in a sequence based on all the preceding words that came before it. And the way that their prediction is informed is by all of the training data that they were given, as well as the different kinds of algorithms that these developers gave to help it learn the relationships within that data. They're especially good at understanding language. They take language as an input and give language as an output. And some of these tools can also understand video, audio, images, things like that. That's called multimodal. And unlike you and I, who think in words, these models work and think in something called a token. And the high level here is that their context window, or their short-term memory, is measured in these tokens. That's what's important for you and I to know. And when your conversation exceeds that token window limit, then you might run into things like it sort of loses the plot of the conversation. It might become a little less coherent. It might forget earlier parts, or at least specific details earlier on in a conversation. Or if you load up an extremely long document or set of documents, then it might not be able to pick out specific details. It sort of like gets the gist of it, but it's not able to pinpoint specific things within that once it goes outside of that context window. The word model is just a combination of all of the training and the algorithms and code, the computer instructions that go into these things. And each one of these companies typically has a small collection of models that we get to use as the end user. And they show up in things like Claude, the chat interface, or ChatGPT. All right, future editing Kyle, just popping in to wrap up this video really quickly. This is running a little longer than I wanted, and I'm deciding to go ahead and cut this into 2 videos. In the next video, I'm gonna give you a concrete way to help make AI work for you. This is where the whole AI literacy piece really comes together, because with this understanding, with this base level knowledge, you're going to be able to put AI to work for you and save time, increase efficiency, improve the quality of your work. One of my favorite use cases for this is to create a custom copy editor. This is trained on my own writing style, and it's something people often say, I wish AI could write more in my tone, in my voice. I wish it didn't sound so robotic or dry or clinical. Well, with these tips, with understanding this base level AI knowledge, you're able to mold these custom assistants into anything you want. I'm gonna walk you through the whole process, and I'm even gonna share my own custom prompt that I've developed to help me save hours of time when I'm creating things like YouTube content, instructional guides, blog posts, answering emails in my tone. All right, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Okay, I'm gonna have my work cut out for me editing this video. So, where do I want to go from here? It is one thing that I do want to clear up, because in the context, oh, I'm so lame. I hope you have an LLM up actually while you're using. I actually hope okay. As usual, I could just go on forever and ever.